A small body hit the cobblestones. Boots crashed down beside it. 2 soldiers. Then 4. Swords half-drawn. Voices barking. Orders nobody could understand. A gloved hand grabbed a fistful of dirty hair and yanked upward. A child. Maybe 7. Maybe 8. Bare feet. A torn blue dress. The crowd in the market square pulled back. Nobody moved to help. Nobody dared. Because the man riding through the gates of that square was not a man you interrupted. 7 feet tall on a black warhorse. A scar from his temple to his jaw. Iron-gray eyes that never softened. 40 years of war on his face. Knelt, the Alpha King. Killer of 3 armies. Conqueror of 7 cities. Friend to no man. Loved by none. Father of none. What that child whispered to him in front of 2,000 people stopped his entire guard cold. Stay with me on this one. Backing up. Let me tell you how that child ended up at his feet. The kingdom was called Athar. Wolf blood country. For 1,000 years, every king, every queen, every soldier of rank had been born with the mark silver in the eye, faster heart, longer teeth when the moon climbed high. The peasants didn't have it. The lords did. That was the rule. Knelt had more of it than anyone alive. When he walked into a room, dogs went silent. When he raised his voice, glass cracked. When he killed a man, he didn't waste a swing. One blow. One breath. Done. He had taken his throne at 23 by walking into his uncle's banquet hall, alone, and walking out alone. The uncle did not walk out at all. That was 30 years ago. Since then he had crushed every rebellion that came at him. Killed 3 rival kings on 3 different battlefields. Burned the city of Vale when it refused to pay tribute. Stood under a sky black with crows and watched 7,000 men kneel because they had run out of reasons not to. He had never married. Never sired a son. Never named an heir. The lords whispered about it. The witches whispered louder. There were only 2 things any of them ever said about his heart. The first was that nobody had ever seen him use it. The second was that something had broken in him a long time ago, and he had decided, deliberately, never to fix it. He didn't talk about the woman. But the old soldiers knew. 40 years back, before the throne, before the wars, there had been a girl in the western forests. A hunter's daughter. She had laughed at him the first time he tried to be serious with her. She had loved him anyway. She had died with their unborn child still inside her, in a raid Knelt did not arrive in time to stop. He had never been a father. He had decided after that he never would be. Now, the morning of the cobblestones. He was riding south through the city of Kor, 3rd capital of his kingdom, biggest market in the north, on his way to put down another little uprising. 2,000 troops behind him. 12 generals. 30 wolf-marked guard. The streets had been cleared by order. Anyone who didn't get out of the procession's way got moved out of it. The girl had not gotten out of the way. She'd been hiding in the bakery alley 3 days. Her parents were a story already told. Father killed in the western drafts. Mother dead in childbirth 2 winters back. The neighbors had fed her for a week, then they had stopped, because the neighbors had children of their own and a hard year coming. She had been living off scraps and sleeping under a tarp. That morning, she had reached out of the alley to grab a heel of bread off a stall. The baker had screamed. 2 soldiers had broken from the procession to deal with it. They had not been gentle. By the time Knelt's horse came around the corner of the square, the girl was on the cobblestones with a soldier's boot beside her ribs and a soldier's hand in her hair. The crowd had pulled back. The market had gone quiet. The guards in front of Kale had drawn swords because the procession was halted, and a halted procession meant something was wrong. Kale saw her. He didn't dismount. He didn't speak. He just looked. For 3 full breaths. The soldier holding her hair felt the look land on the back of his neck and let go like he'd been burned. The other soldier stepped back. The crowd took 1 breath in and held it. This is where it should have ended. He should have ridden on. The girl should have crawled back to her alley. Core would have gone on. The story would never have been told. 1,000 mornings like this one had passed in his kingdom, and he had ridden through every one of them without stopping. But the girl stood up, bare feet on cold stone, bread still in one fist, the other hand pressed against her ribs where the boot had landed. Her face was filthy. There was blood under her nose. Her eyes were a color nobody in that square had ever seen on a peasant child, pale silver, the kind of silver that was supposed to belong only to bloodline lords. She looked at the man on the black horse, and she walked toward him. 12 guards stepped forward to stop her. Kale lifted one hand. They froze where they stood. Nobody moved. She walked the whole length of that square. 40 paces, maybe more. Past the broken stalls. Past the soldiers who'd put her on the ground. Past the captain of the procession, who had his sword half drawn and nowhere to put it. The crowd watched her go. 2,000 people, and not a single one of them said a word. She stopped at the front leg of the black horse. She looked up. The horse was 16 hands tall. Kale, sitting on it, was higher than any roof in the square. From where she stood, she had to crane her neck almost backward to find his face. She found it. She did not blink. For a long time, the only sound was the wind, moving through the awnings of the closed stalls. Then the girl spoke. Her voice was very small. Most of the square didn't hear what she said. The guards heard it. The captain heard it. Kale heard it. She said, "Can you be my dad?" And here is the thing nobody in Mor Athar had ever seen. He flinched. The Alpha King. The man who hadn't moved a single muscle out of order in 30 years of rule. The man who had let an arrow graze his ear in the Battle of Sodran and not even tilted his head to acknowledge it. The man who had once taken news of his own brother's death without changing his expression for the rest of the meeting. He flinched, like she had hit him, right in the chest. His captain noticed it. The captain's name was Vale. He had ridden at Kale's side for 22 years. He had seen the king take wounds, take losses, take betrayals. He had never seen the king flinch. Now Vale saw it. And he did the thing he had been trained never to do. He moved without orders. 2 steps forward. Hand on his hilt. Because something was wrong, and his job for 2 decades had been to act when something was wrong. Kale lifted the same hand he had lifted before. Vale stopped. But he did not step back. Kale did not look at him. He was looking at the girl. He looked at her for a long, long time. Long enough for the captain to begin to be afraid. Long enough for the soldiers behind him to begin to be afraid. Long enough for the crowd, which had been afraid the whole time, to begin to be afraid in a different way. Then Kale Dreven, Alpha King of Mor Athar, the man who knelt to no one and never had, swung his right leg over the saddle and dismounted. 2,000 people made a single sound. It was almost a gasp. Almost a moan. It was the sound of a city watching a thing it could not understand. He walked around the front of his horse. He stood in front of the girl. Then, in full view of his army and his city and his enemies and his witches, he went down on one knee. The cobblestones were wet. He didn't care. His armor scraped against the stone. He didn't care. His captain made a strangled noise behind him. He didn't care. He looked into the girl's face. He brought up one hand, the hand that had ended kings, and placed it very carefully on the side of her head. Two of his fingers were as wide as her cheek. And he said, "Forever, little one." That was it. That was all. The girl's face did not change for a long second. Then, very slowly, like she had been holding it up by herself for too long, it crumpled. She didn't sob. She didn't wail. She just walked the last step into him and pressed her face against the steel of his chest and stood there. His arm came around her shoulders. 2,000 people watched the Alpha King hold an orphan in the middle of a market square and could not have said, if asked, whether what they were watching was the gentlest thing they had ever seen or the most dangerous. Maybe both. Vale, who had drawn his sword, let it slide back into the sheath. The procession did not move for a full minute. Then Kale stood. He bent down again, lifted the girl as easily as he would have lifted a sword belt, and set her on the front of his saddle. He swung up behind her. He looked at his captain. "Southgate is closed today," he said. Vale nodded. "We ride home." Vale nodded again. The procession turned. That afternoon, they reached the gates of the high keep at Dranath. The gates that had not been opened in greeting for any soul in 15 years, opened for a barefoot girl in a torn blue dress. Servants did not know what to do. Nobody had given them orders. The king did not give orders. He carried the child through the great hall, past the long table, past the iron throne, up the stair that nobody but family had ever climbed, and into a room that had been closed behind a door for as long as any of them could remember. The room had a small bed, a window with the moon already showing, a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. The chest had been carved with a wolf and a crescent, the symbols of a woman who had been gone for 40 years. He laid the girl on the bed. She was already half asleep. He sat in the chair beside the bed. He didn't move for the rest of the night. Outside, the kingdom held its breath. Inside, a child slept under a roof she had not known existed when she woke up. The candle burned low. The window showed a moon that was almost full. The man in the chair watched her chest rise and fall, and did not allow himself to think about anything beyond that small movement. For one full night in that one room, the world was very quiet. It seemed like the worst was over. It was not. Just before dawn, the candle in the room guttered out. The girl in the bed turned over in her sleep. Her arm slipped out from under the blanket. The sleeve of the borrowed nightshirt slid up to her elbow. On the inside of her wrist there was a mark. It had not been visible in the market. It had not been visible in the bath. It had not been visible an hour ago. It was visible now. A pale, silver crescent, no bigger than a thumbprint, under the skin like it had been waiting for the right kind of moonlight to come up through it. Cale Dreven, who had not slept, leaned forward in his chair. He looked at the mark. He went very, very still. Now here's the thing. He had seen that mark before. Not on a child. Not in his lifetime. He had seen it on a banner. He had seen it on a tomb. He had seen it carved into the lintel of a house that had been burned down before his grandfather's grandfather was born. The mark was not the mark of a peasant. It was the mark of the silver moon line. The silver moon line had been older than his own. Older than the throne of Mor Athar. They had been the first wolf-blooded family of the north, before there was a kingdom to rule, when the wolves still came down out of the mountains and chose their own kings. They had been hunted to extinction 400 years ago by a coalition of every other wolf line in the country, including Kale's. The silver moon had not been allowed to rise again. The lords had agreed on that, in blood, the night they killed the last of them. There were not supposed to be any more. There was one asleep in his chair's shadow, with bread still under her fingernails. He stood up. He did it very quietly because she was sleeping, and because something inside him had just begun to understand what he had done in the market square. He had not just claimed an orphan. He had, in front of 2,000 witnesses, claimed the last living silver moon as his own daughter. The treaty that kept the silver moon line dead had also kept the peace between every alpha house in the north. 500 years of fragile peace. 500 years of every lord watching every other lord. The treaty held because the silver moon was gone. It was not gone anymore. And every lord in the north was about to find out. Kale walked out of the room. He did not slam the door. He did not summon his guard. He did not raise his voice. He walked in his own house, like a man who had heard a sound in the dark. If you've stayed with me this far, do me one favor, hit the subscribe button. This story is going somewhere you won't expect, and the next part is the part people won't believe until they hear it. Tap subscribe, then come right back. I'll wait. Welcome back. He went down to the witch room. The witch room was below the keep, 3 turns of stone stair down, and the witch in it was older than Kale. Her name was Meven. She had served his mother and his mother's mother. She had counseled him to take the throne. She had told him not to take the woman in the western forest. He had ignored her on that one. He had not made the mistake again. Meven looked up from her table when he came in. She saw his face. She said one word. "Show me." He held out his hand. He was carrying in his palm a small wooden carving he had taken from the pocket of the girl's torn blue dress before the bath. It was a wolf. It had been carved by a child. It was rough. The eyes were 2 crescent moons. Meven looked at the wolf. She sat down very slowly. "Where?" she said. "Kor. The market. This morning." "How old?" 7. Maybe 8. "And you," said Meven in a voice that had gone thin, "did what exactly?" He told her. She did not speak for a long time. When she did not look at him. She looked at the wall. 6 houses, she said. "What?" 6 houses will move on you within 7 days. The Vossen, the Drath, the Iron Tooth, the Grey Lakes, the Hollowfells, and the Fang priests, who don't have a house but who are worse than any of them. They will not come for you. They will come for the girl. They won't reach her. Meven looked up. Her eyes in the candlelight were the color of wet stone. "Kale," she said, "you knelt in front of 2,000 people. Word is already moving south. By tomorrow night, every wolf lord in this country will know that the Alpha King of Mor Athar publicly named a silver moon child his daughter. Every treaty they signed with you, with your father, with your father's father, was signed on the understanding that her line was extinct. You broke that treaty in a market square in front of witnesses. Then they can renegotiate. They are not going to renegotiate." He looked at her. She held his look. "They're going to come and kill her," she said, "and then they're going to come and kill you. In that order. And they're going to do it because they think they have to." He set the carving down on her table. "How long do I have to stop it?" "You can't stop it." "To prepare?" 3 days. 4 if the snow holds them in the passes." He turned to leave. At the door he stopped. "Meven." "Yes." "Is she really one?" She looked at the wolf carving with the crescent eyes. "She is the last one," Meven said. "And I think she chose you." 3 days. That's what he had. He used them. Word went out by Raven, by Rider, by Wolf Runner. The keep at Dranath sealed its outer gates. The standing garrison of 200 became 400 by the second sundown, and 700 by the third. The eastern allies, the houses Kale had not broken, The houses that owed him for old wars sent what they could. It was not enough. He knew it would not be enough. He sent for them anyway. The girl, in the meantime, was being a child. She was named Lyra. He had asked her the morning after the candle. She had told him without looking up from the porridge bowl. Lyra. No house name. She had never been given one. He had given her his. It was a small thing. He said it once at breakfast while she was eating. Lyra Dreven, he said. She stopped chewing. She looked at him. She did not smile. But she did not stop being still in the way she had been still in the market square. She softened in some small place behind her eyes and went back to eating. She followed him everywhere after that. To the war room. To the battlements. To the kennels where the wolf-marked hounds were kept. The men in the keep, who had spent decades being afraid of Knelt Dreven, watched a child with one hand fisted in the back of his cloak walk behind him through every door he opened, and they did not know what to do with what they were seeing. Vale, the captain, said it to Meven on the second night. It's like the keep has been holding its breath for 40 years, and nobody told it could exhale. Meven did not answer. She was sharpening a knife. She was old enough to know that what was coming was going to need every knife in the keep. The attack came on the fourth day, 2 hours after dawn. It came from 3 sides at once. Vossen from the south. Drath from the east. The Fang priests from the west, with no banner, only torches. The Iron Tooth held back, waiting to see who took losses. The Grey Lakes had not come at all. The Hollowfells had broken pact with the others and ridden instead to Knelt's gates with their swords sheathed. 3 sides. 2,000 attackers. 700 defenders behind a wall. Knelt went to the wall in his armor. Lyra was supposed to be in the deepest room of the keep with Meven. He had told her so the night before. She had nodded. He had believed her. She lasted 30 minutes. By the time the first wave broke against the gate, Lyra had slipped past Meven and climbed 3 flights of stairs and was standing in a doorway looking down at her father in the courtyard, and Meven was running up the stairs after her, and an arrow came through the high window and grazed the doorway above Lyra's head and put a splinter in her cheek. She did not cry. She put one hand to her cheek and looked at the blood and put the hand down. She walked out onto the high gallery. The gallery overlooked the courtyard. She could see her father from there. She could see the men dying around him. The mark on her wrist began to glow. It did not glow like a candle. It glowed like a moon. Pale, cold, steady. She did not know what she was doing. She was 8 years old. She had been an orphan for 4 winters and a daughter for 4 days. She did not know about the silver moon line. She did not know about the houses or the treaty or the 400 years. She knew that her father was in the courtyard and bad men were trying to hurt him, and her wrist was glowing, and the air around her hand was moving. She lifted the hand. In the courtyard below, Knelt had just taken a sword across the back of his shoulder. He turned, snarling, with the iron-gray eyes gone full silver and the teeth gone long, and tore the throat out of the man who had landed the blow. 2 more were on him. He killed one. The other got him in the side. He went down to one knee. Vale saw it. Vale screamed something nobody heard. Lyra saw it. The light around her hand went bright enough to cast a shadow on the stones. She did not throw it. She did not speak. She just opened her fist. A pulse of moonlight rolled out from the high gallery in a slow ring. It was silent. It moved like water moves through water. Where it touched the attackers, they stopped. Not killed. Not burned. Stopped. As if a hand the size of the sky had laid itself down across the courtyard and said no. The Fang priests dropped their torches first. Then the Drath men dropped their swords. Then the Vossen, who had been winning, took 3 steps backward and could not take a fourth. The wave that had broken against the gate from the south stood, every man in it, like statues in a flooded street. Cale, on one knee in his own blood, looked up at the high gallery. He saw his daughter on it. Her eyes were silver. Her wrist was a moon. Her face was the face of an 8-year-old girl who had decided, all on her own, that the man bleeding in the courtyard was not going to bleed any longer. He stood up. The shoulder wound did not stop him. The side wound did not stop him. He walked across the courtyard through men who could not move. He climbed the stair to the gallery. He reached his daughter. He went again to one knee, the same knee he had gone to in the market square of Kor 4 days before. He put his arms around her. The light went out. The men in the courtyard fell to the stones. It was over. The story afterward is shorter than the story before. Most stories are. The houses that had sent men to Cale's gate did not send any more. The Vossen paid a tribute and were allowed to keep their lord. The Drath were not. Cale took the Drath head himself by single combat 3 weeks later and gave the Drath lands to the Hollowfells who had stood by him. The Fang priests were broken. They were not exterminated. He could have ordered it. He didn't. He told Meven, on the night the order would have been given, that he had a daughter now, and he was going to think about what daughters thought of the men who fathered them, before he gave any more orders he could not take back. Meven, who had counseled the killing, did not argue. She just nodded. Word of the moonlight went out farther than word of the kneeling had. By the end of that summer, there was not a single wolf house in the north that did not know the silver moon had returned. The treaty that had held 500 years was gone. A new one took its place. It was simpler. It was 3 lines long. The first line was the king's name. The second line was the girl's. The third line said, More Athor protects the last house, and the last house protects More Athor. 6 lords signed it. The other 2 waited a year and signed it after that. Lyra did not sign. She was 9 by then. She was learning to read. She learned in the room she had slept in the first night. The one with the chest at the foot of the bed. Cale had opened the chest that first week, and inside it had been a child's shirt that had never been worn, a wooden rattle, and a folded letter in a hand he had not seen in 40 years. He read the letter. He did not tell anyone what was in it. Not Meven. Not Vale. Not Lyra. He kept the rattle in a drawer beside his own bed. The shirt, washed and pressed by the laundress and offered to Lyra as a nightshirt the next winter, became her favorite thing. She did not know whose it had been. She did not ask. She wore it until it would not fit her, and then she folded it and put it in the chest, where her father had originally found it, and she told him it was waiting. He asked her, waiting for what? She said, for the next one. He did not answer her. He went out of the room, and he sat in the hallway for a long time. When he came back, his eyes were as iron-gray as they had ever been, but something in his face had moved, and Lyra pretended not to notice, because she was 8 years old and she already knew that the dignity of fathers is sometimes a thing that has to be left alone. She grew up in that keep. She was not coddled. She was the heir of 2 of the oldest wolf lines in the country, and she had a kingdom to inherit. She trained. She studied. She rode out with her father on the long circuits of the borderlands, and she sat at the long table during councils, and she said very little for the first 3 years and a great deal more after that. She was not afraid of him. That was the strangest thing, and the thing the lords who came to court could never quite get used to. Every grown man who walked into Cale Dreven's hall walked in with his spine a little straighter than he wanted it to be. Lyra walked in barefoot half the time, sat on the arm of his iron chair, leaned her head against his shoulder during the boring parts, and once, during a particularly tedious negotiation with a southern lord, fell asleep with her hair falling across his sleeve. The southern lord, who had come to negotiate hard, did not. He went home with everything he had asked for, and he told his wife when he got there that he had been outflanked by a sleeping child. The years went on. The king grew older. He did not soften exactly. The iron in him was iron, but it had been forged into a different shape. The last scene of this story is not a battle. It is, of all things, a market square. The same market square, in the city of Kor, on a cold morning 7 years after the morning of the cobblestones. The procession is smaller this time. Only 100 guards. Vale older still at his right. The crowd is bigger. The crowd is quiet, but it is not afraid. Lyra rides at the front. She is 15. She rides her own horse, a gray one smaller than her father's black. The pale silver in her eyes has not faded. It has settled. The procession reaches the place where the alley meets the square. The bakery is still there. The baker is older. He stands in the doorway with flour on his hands and watches the riders come. Lyra sees him. She stops her horse. She gets down. Kale on his black horse watches her. He does not stop her. She walks across the cobblestones. She stops at the bakery door. She holds out her hand. In her palm there is a small silver coin, more than enough for a heel of bread. She gives it to the baker. She does not say anything. The baker, who has not slept well in 7 years for reasons he has never quite admitted, takes the coin. His hand shakes a little. Lyra nods to him. She walks back to her horse. She mounts. The procession rides on. Kale, riding behind her, doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. He had said his words in that same square 7 years before on one knee, and they had cost him nothing and given her everything, and they had been enough. That's the whole story. A small girl asked the largest man in the country a question nobody had ever asked him. He gave her his answer. And the kingdom, the actual kingdom, the borders, the bloodlines, the future of every wolf house in the north, bent itself around those words like a river bends around a stone. That's how it works sometimes. The smallest people ask the biggest questions. And the right ones, every once in a while, get the right answer. Forever, little one. That's where we leave them.